Today we are going to add and subtract rational expressions, and I think there's some room on your first slide to remind you about adding and subtracting fractions. If I have 1/5 plus 2/5, what do I have? 3/5. Notice you don't actually add the denominators, but the denominators have to be the same, and then you add the numerators. If I have 1/2 plus 1/3, how do we do that? We have to get a common denominator. So the second fraction has a factor of 3. We would need to multiply this fraction, top and bottom, by 3. That fraction would become 3/6. This one, we have to put in a factor of 2. That one would become 2/6. Then we could add them together. So this is what we are going to be doing with rational expressions. We're going to make the denominators match so that we can add or subtract them. So there is an example like this in your assignment. Do you see how the denominators look almost identical, but they're just kind of backwards of each other? This denominator is actually negative x plus 3. What could we do to negative x plus 3 to make it look more like x minus 3? Take out the negative 1, and that would make this x minus 3. So this thing is actually 4x over x minus 3. That's the first fraction. Okay, you ready for your first trick? See how this is subtraction?
Yeah.
Attach that subtraction to the second fraction. So this is negative 6 over negative 1 times x minus 3. Do these two fractions match? Do their denominators match? What does the second fraction have that the first fraction does not? A negative 1. We are going to multiply the top and the bottom by that negative 1. Now, both denominators have a negative 1, and both denominators have an x minus 3. So now these two things match, and we can combine them. The common denominator is negative 1 over x minus 3. In the numerator, 4x times negative 1 is negative 4x, and we have a negative 6. Once you have gotten a common denominator, and you've combined like terms and done all of that, your last step is to look at your numerator and see if you can factor your numerator at all. What do negative 4 and negative 6 have in common? Negative 2. Negative 4x divided by negative 2 is positive 2x. Negative 6 divided by negative 2 is positive 3. And on the bottom, we have negative 1 over x minus 3. No, I don't want to switch yet. Do you see anything on the top and the bottom that could cancel? The negatives. This negative in front of the 2 and the negative in front of the 1, the negatives will cancel. So our final answer is going to be 2 times the quantity 2x plus 3 over x minus 3. Okay. On this one, I noticed that the two denominators do not match. One of them is x minus 3. The other one is x plus 2. My first step, especially as I transfer this onto my own paper, is to space this out a little bit. So this is 6 over x minus 3. And again, I'm going to take that negative and attach it to the second fraction, negative 2 over x plus 2. Now we get to start making the denominators match. The first denominator has x minus 3. So what does the second denominator need? X minus 3. But you can't just put it on the bottom. Whatever you do to the bottom of the fraction, you have to also do to the top of the fraction. Now, both fractions have an x minus 3. What does the second fraction have that the first fraction doesn't? X plus 2. So we need to put an x plus 2 on the top and the bottom of the first fraction. Now we have a common denominator. It doesn't matter what order you write them, whether it's x plus 2, x minus 3, or whether you write x minus 3, x plus 2. The order of that denominator does not matter. What matters is that there's an x plus 2 somewhere in the denominator, there's an x minus 3 somewhere in the denominator. On the top, what do you suppose we're going to do with this 6 and the parentheses? They're giving me hand motions like we're going to distribute, but you guys can't see the hand motions because you're just listening to a video, but they're doing hand motions that mean doot, doot. So 6x plus 12. We also need to distribute the negative 2. This is where attaching that negative to the 2 is really going to help you, because if you forgot to do that, you'll forget about the minus between them and you'll forget to distribute the negative, and you have to distribute that negative. So negative 2x and plus 6. What do you suppose we're going to do next? You can say the words. You're correct. Yeah. Combine like terms. We've got 6x and negative 2x. That would be 4x. And 12 and 6 would be 18. Our denominator is x plus 2, x minus 3. And it'd be nice if we were done. But we can't be done because it's not fully simplified. It says combine and simplify. What do 4x and 18 have in common? 2. And that would leave you with 2x plus 9. And your denominator is x plus 2, x minus 3. Sometimes when you factor the final numerator, you end up with something in the numerator that'll cancel something in the denominator. So that's why you need to factor at the end, just to make sure there's nothing else that can be crossed off. That would be our final answer.
We should have a food day since we're on advisory on Friday.
You hear that, everyone? My fourth hour wants a food day. We'll see if I give it to him. All right. On example 3, we have a little bit more work to do. We've got 3x over. Can this be factored? Yeah. Yes, it factors into x plus 3, x minus 3. Again, I see subtraction. Attach that subtraction to your next one. Can we factor the second denominator? Yes, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us 3 and add up to negative 4. Since we're adding up to a negative but multiplying to a positive, they must both be negative, so negative 1 and negative 3. So that one factors into x minus 1, x minus 3. Do you see anything in the denominators that currently matches?
Yeah.
They both have an x minus 3, so that part's done. Next, this first denominator has an x plus 3, so this one needs an x plus 3. And The second one has an x minus 1, so the first one needs an x minus 1. The really good news here is that you do not have to multiply all of that stuff in the denominator together. You're going to leave it factored. And again, the order doesn't matter as long as you have an x plus 3 somewhere in there, an x minus 3 somewhere in there, and an x minus 1 somewhere in there. Okay, on the top, 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times negative 1 is negative 3x. From the other fraction, negative 5 times x is negative 5x. No. Negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. What do you suppose we need to do next? My 4th hour is very quiet today. I think it's because Emily's gone.
Yeah.
We need to combine like terms. So we have 3x squared minus 8x minus 15. Okay, now, here's the killer thing. We have to try to factor the top. And there's a 3 in front, which means we have to multiply the 3 times the negative 15. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us negative 45 and add up to negative 8. Anytime the number we're multiplying to get is like bigger than about 30, it doesn't pop into my head. So I know 1 times 45 is 45. 2 doesn't work. 3 times 15. 4 doesn't work. 5 times 9. I don't think 6 works. 7 doesn't work. 8 doesn't work. And then we're back to 9. Now look at these options. Can we get 8 from any of these options? No. So it's not factorable, and we are done. So good news, sometimes it doesn't factor and you're done. Bad news, sometimes it does factor and then you have to factor it, keep going, see if anything crosses off. This one looks crazy because it's 3 terms. It's 3 fractions, but it's really not that bad. So give it a try on your own. Pause the video and see if you can get this one worked out. I'll get it started for you. Do you see how if there's nothing that needs to be factored, I just put parentheses around it because it's done. This last denominator is the first one that needs to be factored. And the really nice thing here is that the common denominator that you're trying to get is that third fraction. So really, you just have to mess with the first 2 fractions to get your common denominator, and then you'll be done. So pause the video, take a minute, try to get common denominator between these first 2 fractions, and then distribute on the top, combine your like terms, all that good stuff. Okay, I'll talk through this pretty fast. We've got an x plus 2 in the third one and the second one, so the first one needs the x plus 2. We've got x minus 2 in the third one and the first one, so the second one needs the x minus 2. So our common denominator is x plus 2, x minus 2. 3x plus 6, negative 2x plus 4, and the x plus 3. Whoopsie. Then combine like terms. 3x, negative 2x, and x gives us 2x. 6, 4, and 3 gives us 13. The good news here, 2x and 13 have nothing in common, so we can't factor that numerator, and we are done. On your assignment, I am going to change this a little bit. Instead of going through 36 evens, we're going to go through 34 evens, and we're going to cross off number 42 and cross off number 52. So 7.3 assignment, numbers 2, 4, 28 through 34 evens, and number 44.